Now, this is Bruno Bianchi Sarcone. I run Spainguru.es, and this is the free Spanish non-lucrative visa webinar. And the way this webinar is structured is before the application, during the application, and after the approval. First, we're going to go through some definitions, talk about consulates, third-party processing company BLS, tourist and resident status in Spain, some tax considerations, non-lucrative visa eligibility and requirements. We're going to go in depth into the different requirements and documentations. And then we're going to talk about during the application, timing and application process, and after the approval, how you arrive to Spain, the renewal process, if you plan to stay longer in Spain, how you go for the long-term residence and even the Spanish citizenship. And then also common pathways for transition to work permits. Okay, this is a very summarized list of things that we're going to go through. Remember that the content of this webinar is for information purposes only and it's not legal advice. The requirements listed here are not official. Check your specific consulate's requirements. A little bit about Spainguru. Our objective is facilitating the relocation process for English-speaking foreigners to Spain since 2014. And you can find some wonderful reviews on Trustpilot and also on Google. And in fact, if you want to leave a review sometime because you feel that the information I'm sharing today is valuable, you can do it by going on the green bar on top, push the red button, and it will redirect you to Trustpilot. Now, you can use Spainguru.es for absolutely free. You can find so many free resources like the wiki newsletter, a YouTube channel with almost 1,000 videos, articles, almost 2,000 articles out there, and of course, a very vibrant Facebook group community and Reddits with more than 150,000 members, and the Spanish Non-Lucrative Visa group with more than 22,000 members. It's probably the biggest group out there. If you haven't joined yet, I highly recommend you doing so. You can also find more webinars. I have a total of 6 webinars on Spainguru that I have every 15 days, and also a newly published step-by-step move to Spain checklist that goes all the way starting 1 year before your intended date to arrive to Spain and even after arrival, all the steps and everything, all the information, all the articles, all the videos, and related to each of the steps, any related services that may be useful for you, etc., etc. So check it out, okay? And of course, you can find vetted professionals on Spainguru, starting by immigration experts and tax advisors. At the very least, I highly recommend you engaging with those two, even before taking the decision to move to Spain. Just having aligned your immigration needs and tax needs is very, very important. And then if you're going to apply for the non-lucrative visa or any other visa, you can find compliant health insurances, medical certificates, phone translations, apostille services, and so many more services, more than 100 services that I have personally vetted myself. Now, let's start with before the application and going deep into the non-lucrative visa. What is this visa? It's a Spanish visa for non-EU citizens who can financially support themselves, who don't need to work in Spain. And this visa is stated or created by 2 laws. The main law, the Ley Orgánica 4/2000, and the regulation of the law. But it's important you understand that the main law is higher in hierarchy. It's more important than the regulation of the law, okay? And this has deep implications into the changes that we've been through that started on May 20th, 25. What changed was not the main law. The main law is the same since year 2000. It's the same, 25 years. But the regulation of the law has been changing, okay? But not everything on the regulation can change, and be legally correct, okay? And this is the implications that it has for the minimum stay requirements, for example. We're going to go through that. But it's important that you understand that a new regulation started and is effective since May 20th, 2025, okay? More on that later on. Now, let's talk about consulates in the US, UK, Canada, and Australia. You can find dedicated pages on Spainguru.es for each of the consulates in these 4 countries. It's important that you understand that you can't apply for this visa from within Spain. You can only do it from the consulate where you legally are resident, so within the area that that consulate serves, its jurisdiction. So you will need to prove that you're a legal resident within that area. If you're a dual passport holder, potentially you could apply from the consulate from your origin country as well, even if you're not legally a resident there as well. So you can find each of those consulate pages on Spainguru.es. If you go to Visa Guides, Spain Non-Lucrative Visa Guides, Non-Lucrative Visa Consulates, you will find the list of each of those consulates. And why is it so powerful to know this? Because I am listing every single piece of content that mentions each of the consulates, starting by first-hand experiences from Spainguru community members who are gently describing what they are going through, how they applied, how long did it take, etc., and all the different things, and sometimes requirements that are not online, that are not on the websites. Okay, and it's very, very important, in my opinion, that you follow those first-hand experiences, because each consulate is very, very different and things change constantly. You will also notice that many consulates, in particular in the UK, every consulate works with BLS International, and most consulates in the States also work with BLS International. BLS International is an Indian company that is hired, or where the Spanish consulates outsource the processing of certain visas. Okay, sometimes not all the visas, sometimes just the student visa, sometimes just the Schengen visa, sometimes all the visas in one particular consulate. For example, in New York City, BLS International doesn't process the non-lucrative visa. It's important that you understand this. But for example, in Miami, recently, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Houston, all those use BLS International. So when you are going to process your visa, you're going to have to deal with this company rather than with the consulate directly. So it's important you understand whether your consulate is using this outsourced service. Now, this is the Schengen area in 2025, and here's the maps, because we're going to mention it also several times. It's a group of 29 European countries that is internally borderless. This is important. So when you enter the Schengen area, it doesn't matter where you enter it from, okay? As a British or as a US citizen or Canadian or Australian, you will have a 90-day period permit to stay as a tourist within this area of 29 countries, okay, in a period of 180 days or half a year, okay? It's a rolling period. You cannot exceed this period inside this area. If you plan to stay longer, okay, you will have to obtain a temporary visa or another kind of visa in the country in which you pretend to stay. Now, some nationalities will require a Schengen visa to enter this area. As a US, British, Canadian, or Australian, you don't need a Schengen visa. You can just enter directly with your passport, right? So as I said, if you plan to stay longer than 90 days, you will have to secure a visa that will grant you a residence permit, okay? The non-lucrative visa is considered to be a temporary visa or residency because it will grant you typically 5 years of residency if you renew your permit. Okay, as you probably know, you have to renew 2 times. Okay, and they say that the typical period of time that you can have this residency, the non-lucrative residency, is 5 years. Since it's below or under 5 years, it's considered to be a temporary residency. Okay, so over 5 years is a long-term residency. There's no technically there's no thing like a permanent residency in Spain. There is temporary or long-term residency. Now, citizens from EU countries or European Union countries and associate countries like Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, as well as their spouses, are exempt from this visa type if planning to retire in Spain. But if they plan to stay in Spain without working, like retiring, for example, they must fulfill other conditions. And for example, if you are an EU passport holder or you have the possibility to become one, because some people are saying, you know, I have the possibility maybe to obtain the Irish passport because I have some Irish ancestor, or vice versa, okay? Maybe it is more interesting for you to wait until you obtain your EU passport, because the requirements for staying in Spain more than 90 days as a EU passport holder are much less stringent than the non-lucrative visa, okay? It is a much more simpler process. You can apply from Spain. Let's say the residence permit they will give you will be valid for 5 years. It's renewable. And if you plan to stay without working, you will only have to show approximately 100% of the IPREM, which is 7,200 euros. There are some slight region variations, people say in the community, but it's much less than the 28,800 euros than the non-lucrative visa for the main applicants, okay? And of course, it will include a work permit possibility, so you can start working anytime for a company or for your own project. And if you're non-EU passport holder who is married to you, okay, as an EU passport holder, can apply for the community family card and reside in Spain. So piggyback you on your residence permits without problems and gets the same benefits: 5 years in work permits, no renewal periods in between, etc., etc. So it is really interesting. If you have the possibility to obtain an EU passport, then it's much better than the non-lucrative visa, in my humble opinion. Now let's talk about some tax considerations. First concept, and most important, tax residency in Spain. Now, what happens? You become a tax resident in Spain and must pay tax on your global income and potentially on the assets net value, okay, of your assets, if any of the following conditions apply. So only one has to apply. The most common one is if you spend over 183 days in Spain within a calendar year from January 1st to December 31st. The days don't need to be consecutive. It doesn't matter if you're as a tourist or as a visa holder. Doesn't matter if you spend physically in Spain 183 days plus from January 1st to December 31st, you become a tax resident in Spain in the eyes of the Spanish tax authorities. Or if your main economic activity or primary income source is in Spain, or if your spouse or minor children are permanent residents in Spain. Okay, so any of those three conditions. So you have to play it smart if in case you, at least maybe in the first year or two, you don't want to become a tax resident in Spain. It's something that you potentially can do. We're going to go through that. A little bit more about taxes, okay? So important taxes to have in mind is that, first of all, income tax, that its deadline is on June 30th. For example, June 30th, 2026, you will pay taxes on the income in 2025, okay? As we said, Spanish tax residents are taxed on worldwide income with progressive rates that range 19% to 47%, and there are regional variations, okay? Not very much, but for income tax, but there are some variations because there's a part that is federal or national, and there is another part that is for each region, okay? Now, $1 million question is, you can see there on the right, there's a table with all the brackets, with the progressive brackets that I just mentioned. You will see that the fifth bracket is between 60,000 euros and 300,000 euros. So you say, like, if I make 100K taxable income, do I have to pay 45% tax? The answer is no. You will pay an effective tax rate of around 36, 37%. Okay, we're going to see that later on. Okay, and of course, there are allowances depending on the type of income and your personal situation. Then there is the Form 720 that you have to declare at the beginning of the year, where you disclose the net value of your assets abroad in different categories. For example, bank deposits, okay? If this category is over 50,000 euros in value, if you have 10 bank accounts outside of Spain with 5,000 euros in value each, the total of the category is 50,000 euros. Therefore, you have to declare it, okay? And you have to do that until March 31st. Then there is the regional wealth tax. So depending on where you live in Spain, it's going to be kicking in at the lower threshold. For example, Catalonia, 500,000 euros. Or in Madrid and Andalusia, in practice, they don't have it. So it will have a strong impact where you move in Spain. And then there is a solidarity tax, which is a wealth tax, but is a national tax that kicks in at a much higher threshold, starting at 3 million euros without counting allowances, okay? But it works more or less the same as the wealth tax. Remember that Spain has double taxation agreements with the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and many other countries to avoid being taxed twice on the same thing. It doesn't mean that you will pay less taxes. It means that you will have to pay taxes where you're, let's say, a tax resident, okay? And that can be higher, but you won't pay taxes on the same thing, okay? It's important to understand that regional rules vary significantly. Your personal situation has a strong impact. So it's very, very important, as I mentioned before, to consult with a tax advisor, okay? And here's the explanation why the 100K income doesn't pay 45% tax, because basically you pay 19% tax on the first 12,450 euros that you make. Then you pay 24% tax on the following 7,500 euros, and on and on. So effectively, you will pay an average or median, if you want, of those tax rates. So 100K pays, let's say, only 36%, which is not a low tax rate, but definitely lower than the 45%. So I like to always to answer this question because a lot of people think this, and a lot of people are very concerned about Spanish taxes, but they maybe are not as bad as they think. If you want to know more, you can join my free webinar on Spanish taxes. I think the next one is tomorrow, and of course you get a recording after it. Now let's continue with the NLV. Let's go through the non-lucrative visa documentation. This is a summary list, and of course it will never replace the official requirements and documents that the consulate and BLS office requires. First, they will ask you for your address in Spain. So where do you plan to move? Many consulates are not strict, and they will accept you telling them, I plan to move to a province like Seville, Valencia, Madrid, Catalonia. That will be it, okay? But certain consulates are strict, and they will ask you to say exactly where you plan to live. So either showing Airbnb receipts for several months, or telling exactly that you're gonna go and move with some friends, or that you bought your property and that you show the property deeds. So you have to be careful about this, because depending on the consulate, you will be asked one thing or another. I asked Ainhoa Manero from Sterna Abogados, which is one of my recommended immigration lawyers who has very extensive experience with the non-lucrative visa application. And she says that her customers or clients will never have to show any booking or reservation in advance, because this is a very strict interpretation that some consulates have that is absolutely not included in any regulation or any law. Okay, so if you go with your lawyer, potentially maybe your lawyer can can defend you if you are being required this very strict documentation, okay, about the address in Spain. Then there is the address in the country of residence. You have to prove that you live legally within the jurisdiction of your consulate, so you can apply for the non-lucrative visa. For example, if you live in Atlanta, Georgia, you need to show your driving license at the Miami BLS office to prove that you can apply from there. Then prove sufficient financial means to support yourself and dependents, if applicable, without working in Spain. Have comprehensive health insurance from a company authorized to operate in Spain. Or if you are a UK retiree, maybe via the S1 form, you can access the public healthcare system in Spain. Therefore, you don't need a private health insurance to apply unless you want to hire it, but it's not a requirement. Then show a clean criminal background check, medical certificates, spouses. If you plan to move with your couple, a married couple, dependent children, you have to provide marriage certificate, birth certificates, new originals, okay, of those certificates. We're going to go through that later on. And potentially we have to prove that you will not engage in any work or professional activities in Spain by a letter or a letter of intent, promise that you won't engage in any work. So this is very strict at consulates in Spain, that they don't have to have the slightest doubt that you potentially will go back to work or plan to work in the future, because it could be a straight denial. So they are very strict about this. As I mentioned, providing letter of intent sometimes is a requirement, sometimes it's optional, but in many cases it makes sense that to provide a letter of intent, especially if you need to explain your situation to the officers reviewing your case, your finances, and in general. So it's always a good idea to have a letter of intent and say exactly what will help your case without adding extra information that is not necessary. Just a quick moment. Over 60% of you watching right now aren't subscribed. That's a lot of people getting value without hitting that button. If my videos have helped you understand Spain's immigration process, visas, or life here, even just once, please subscribe now. I'm working hard to reach 10,000 subscribers by the end of 2025, and your click truly makes a difference. Thanks so much. Now, let's keep going. If you're moving with your couples, marriage, birth certificates, kids, school enrollment, and as I said, some consulates will ask you to show rental contracts, etc. And many consulates, especially the ones working with BLS, will ask also for photos that they will take you at BLS offices, fees payments. You always have to pay the fees. Everyone has to pay a fee, every applicant, also children, etc. Okay. If you want to know more, I have a 2-video series of 55 frequently asked questions with Ainhoa Manero on Spainguru's YouTube channel. There you have the list of questions. There's too many, probably you cannot read them, but it's as a fantastic extra apart from this webinar, because it will give you much more information on things that I don't have the time to talk about here. Now let's go deeper into the financial requirements for the NLV in 2025. You need to show proof of sufficient funds, how much money you need to show, including savings and or regular income. So it can be only savings, it could be only passive income, or it could be a combination of both. Okay, so the minimum threshold to apply for a non-lucrative visa in terms of funding is the main applicant has to show 400% of the IPREM in 2025, and the dependents 100% of the IPREM. The IPREM is an index that is published every year at the beginning of the year. Right now, this index is 100% of the IPREM is 7,200 for dependents, okay? And the main applicant is 400%, so 4 times 7,200, 28,800 euros. Therefore, if you're applying as a couple, you can see on the table on the right is 28,800 euros plus 7,200 euros, 36,000 euros. This is the minimum financial threshold to apply for the non-lucrative visa in 2025. This can change any year, but also it can stay like this, frozen for 10 years. Okay, this has happened. You can see the progression in the next slide. As I mentioned, it can be savings and or passive income. Typical thing, if you plan to retire in Spain, pension withdrawals, okay? You can also use rental income as passive income, but be careful because certain consulates consider this type of income as an unsafe or unsure income source because they say maybe the tenant will stop paying you, okay? So it is not always a good idea to use only rental income as your only source of passive income for the non-lucrative visa, okay? Always understand your consulate's requirements. You can show dividends and any other type of passive income, okay, as long as it is liquid and readily available without any penalties, okay? In order to prove this, you will show your bank statements, okay, and documentation from the bank wherever you have the money or their income sources in the US, UK, Canada, Australia, or anywhere else, okay? Some consulates will ask you for tax returns as well, for several years of tax returns. And remember that you will need double, between asterisks, I will write this, double the amount for the renewal, okay? And there are regional variations, but it is not really like double, okay? Because when you're applying for the non-lucrative visa, you're applying for a visa that will grant you a residence permit of 1 year. But when you renew your non-lucrative visa, the renewal periods will be for 2 years, okay? So Spain wants to know whether you're going to have enough money to sustain yourself in a period of 2 years when you renew your visa. Therefore, you will need double the amount if you are applying, for example, with savings. If you are applying with 30,000 euros for the initial applications, and that's what you have in the bank, you don't have any passive income, and when you renew after 1 year, you only have deposit in your bank, you will have to have the deposit enough for the full 2 years. Therefore, it's going to be 30,000 round numbers times 2. You will have to have 60,000 euros in your bank, okay, if you have a deposit. But if you have passive income, then the calculation is a bit different because it's a steady recurrent income that comes every single month. So you will have to calculate how much you will be making in that period of time of 2 years. As we mentioned before, the IPREM index is an index that is published every year. I have recently published a video about how this works, but basically the Spanish government has to obtain political agreement in order to renew the national budget, okay? If there is no political agreement, the national budget stays the same as the previous years. And the IPREM is one of the parts of the national budget. So if there's no political agreement, the IPREM stays frozen. So in 2023, 24, and 25, it stayed at 600 euros per month or 7,200 euros per year, which is 100% of the IPREM. You can see there that from 2009 until 2016, it stayed the same for 6 years, 7 years. It doesn't mean that it will go up, but it could go up, okay? It could go up any single year, and it could go up every year. For example, in 2020, it went up in 21, it went up in 22, and it went up in 23. So 4 years of increases. So you have to plan accordingly, right? Because when you renew your visa, you will renew with a new IPREM, okay? Imagine that it goes from 600 euros per month to 650 in 2026. It means that the main applicant will have to show a minimum threshold of 31,200 euros, and each dependent 7,800 euros. It normally goes up by these quantities, okay? 50 euros, 30 euros, 20 euros per month, okay? But it could be anything, especially lately that we have been having so much inflation. They could have a stronger update, right? So this is something that you have to have in mind. And of course, the IPREM is in euros. You have to also account for the currency risk. If you're having dollars, now the dollar is a bit weak, and the pound is always stronger than the euro, but there are currency fluctuations that you have to have into account, because the IPREM and all the figures of a Spanish visa are, of course, in euros, not in the local currency, right? Also, something that happened related to the financial requirements as of May 20th, 2025, the date in which the new regulation took effectiveness. Many consulates started to require extra documentation in order to match the information from the applicant and the bank account where they held their money or passive income. They started asking certificates that many banks are not used to provide outside of Spain. Like, for example, a certificate that shows the bank name, the address of the name, the full account identification together with the full name. This should match with your ID, right? They want to make sure that you are the person applying and you are the person who holds those funds in that account, and also other certificates like account opening date or closing date, if applicable, and probably the most controversial ones, the balance of the account as of December 31st of the previous year. So if you're applying on 2025, they wanted to know a certificate from the bank that how much money you had on December 31st in 2024. And the last one, an average balance, and I think it's an average monthly balance. Let me see, availability. Yes, average monthly balance for the previous years. And many bank accounts outside of Spain don't provide these certificates, but there are ways to do it. And why they ask for all this? Because in Spain, it is, let's say, possible to obtain these certificates. And here, for example, I went to my bank, which is BBVA, and I got one certificate saying I am the owner of this bank account. This is my name. And there is literally, this is something that I downloaded from my app, but it still has a JPEG, an image of a wet ink stamp, because authorities and banks love stamps, right? So this is where, the legislator or the ones working for the government are thinking about that you should be able to provide this certificate. But of course, maybe you go to your bank and they think you are crazy because they never saw something like this. You don't have to be worried about this. I have a video where I ask Ainhoa Manero about the new non-lucrative visa financial requirements, and we talk extensively about this on YouTube, on Spainguru's YouTube channel. 2 videos I have about this. And basically, long story short, but please watch the videos because there's so many nuances in this. But if you do everything you can to show what you have, if you show, for example, if you can show a certificate with your monthly balances, maybe you take an Excel, you do your calculations, you show the monthly balances, you show the final balance, you bring this to the bank, maybe you obtain a stamp from the bank or not, maybe you bring it to a notary public to make it look more official, and this is what you would submit, okay? And maybe, and surely this could be accepted because there's no other way that you can provide what they want, okay? So this is, let's say, shortening the information of the videos, that you shouldn't be that worried if you can't provide that certificate, because there are ways in order to, let's say, circumvent this block. Now, another very commonly asked question: can I work remotely for non-Spanish companies? Okay, so as I said, when you apply for the non-lucrative visa, if you create the slightest doubt that you plan to work or you will work in Spain, or after taking a sabbatical year, you have the plan to go back to work, some people disclose that, and even if it's absolutely legal that you go to Spain, and you just spend 2 years, 1 year on the non-lucrative visa, and then maybe you go back to your home country to work. Some people wrote this in their letter of intent, and they were denied, even if there's no problem supposedly in saying that. But the consulates have a crusade against people who maybe, honestly, they say, yeah, I want to spend some time in Spain without working, but then I want to work. This could be a strong denial. So be smart and be careful with the wording that you use, because this is it sometimes is a bit crazy. Okay. Now, once you get your non-lucrative visa by fulfilling every requirement of a non-lucrative visa, you have your savings, your passive income, and everything, and people come to Spain. Many work remotely for non-Spanish companies, many under the non-lucrative visa, and they become Spanish tax residents, and they pay taxes in Spain for their global income, and they don't pay Social Security, they have their private health insurances, and they renew their non-lucrative visas without mentioning anything about their works, their remote works for non-Spanish companies, and nothing happens. This is the situation. Not only this, it's a gray area. There is a Supreme Court ruling saying that, one person doing this was right. Okay, so the law, it's actually on your side. The Supreme Court is on your side if you're in this situation. Okay, of course, I'm not recommending you to do it. As of 2023. There is a digital nomad visa or teleworkers visa that is more suitable for this setup, okay? And but non-lucrative visa is much older type of visa or residency, and maybe they weren't thinking about remote work when they first created it. But this is the situation. Please watch also the video about this, because I'm not an immigration lawyer. I'm not recommending you to work under the non-lucrative visa, but it is a gray area, and it's important that you understand that if you have remote work for non-Spanish companies, and actually the law text in Spanish says working in Spain which means more, which it can be interpreted to working for a Spanish company. So they're not saying that they say they don't care, or they don't mention if you happen to be working outside of Spain, right? So this is the situation. And again, take it with a pinch of salt. It's not legal advice, and always consult with an immigration lawyer. But just to give more strength into this case, if you look at Edinburgh's consulate, so United Kingdom, they actually officially accept that you could work and still obtain the non-lucrative visa if you have a work that has certain characteristics. In this case, there was a Spainguru community member that got the non-lucrative visa, and the husband had a job at the oil rig, at the gas and oil platform in the North Sea. This person had to travel every 15 days and still is under a non-lucrative visa. And also, I have interviewed immigration lawyers for people who have specific jobs, like pilots, for example, that they go back once a month and they work for maybe a week, and then they go back to Spain and then look at the visa. So if you're in any of these situations, of course, 100%, I highly recommend you going with an experienced immigration lawyer that, of course, you can find on spainguru.es. But it is absolutely possible to work under certain circumstances with the non-lucrative visa and still, of course, be within the law. I would never recommend, and I will never mention anything that is outside the law, but it's important that you understand that there are nuances in this, because the legal texts are not perfect. Now let's talk about private health insurance requirements. Unless you are a UK retiree, which, as I mentioned, you can access the public healthcare system in Spain via the S1 form. Therefore, the private health insurance is not a requirement in this case, but you can still hire it if you want, because it also takes several weeks or even months to get access to public healthcare system. Unless you are one of those, you will have to provide a private health insurance. There are some conditions for this health insurance policy to be compliant for the non-lucrative visa or any other Spanish visa. The conditions are no co-payments, in many cases, no reimbursements. There are some consulates that also mention reimbursements as a potential denial reason. No waiting periods. Okay, so you need to be covered from moment zero in which you set your foot into Spanish territory. You need to be covered. Full coverage. So for any medical situation, you have to be covered. But I added an asterisk there because there's a very big nuance in this point. Okay. Now, most of the Spanish companies will require a yearly payment in advance, a full year. Okay. And they need this in order to provide the initial certificate of coverage in Spanish. Okay. That has to be in Spanish. It has a certain wording, and it's a required document to apply for the non-lucrative visa. Okay. Normally, after you are in Spain, you can pay on a monthly basis, okay? But it will have an increased cost. I have been discussing this with an agent last week, and told me this, basically. You can, maybe, your premium is 1,000 euros per year, okay, if you pay a full year in advance. But if after 1 year you already are on the non-lucrative visa, you still need to get your certificate of coverage for the renewal, and you want to pay on a monthly basis, maybe you will end up paying 1,300 euros, okay, because you will have to pay an extra because of paying on a monthly basis. But basically, you have the option to pay monthly after 1 year in Spain. Now, frequently asked questions: are my medicines covered? If you're under private health insurance, you will have to pay retail price for your medicines. What should be the health insurance start date? Normally, you should start it on the same month in which you intend to move to Spain. Okay, for example, you're moving on 15th of December, you started on 1st of December, okay? What if are there health insurance for older than 75 years of age? Yes, as far as I know, DKV and ADESLAS have policies that are compliant. ADESLAS until 84 years of age and DKV until 99 years of age. If you are interested in the ADESLAS ones, you can find on spainguru.es. What if I have pre-existing conditions? Okay, so I'm going to be circling back to the full coverage condition, because I told you that you need to be covered for any type of medicines. But this is, again, a gray area sometimes, and it will depend on how serious your pre-existing condition is. For example, you have been diagnosed cancer in the last 5 years, okay, in the last until 5 years, it's going to be extremely hard for you to obtain a private health insurance that covers you, okay, if you have been diagnosed cancer in the last 5 years. If it's more than 5 years, then it's possible, okay, but less than 5 years, no. To give you an example, okay, now if you have, for example, high blood pressure, stuff like this, not so serious pre-existing conditions, then what can happen very likely is that you get a private health insurance that is ready to cover you, and provide the certificate of coverage that is compliant for your non-lucrative visa, but in fact, it will exclude certain preconditions, okay? Therefore, if you have problems related to those preconditions in Spain, you will have to pay that treatment out of your pocket. And of course, again, the medicines you always pay out of pocket, right? This is the situation. You have the option, and this is going with the next question. Can I pay into the Spanish public system? Yes, you can, but you have to spend at least 1 year of residency in Spain. There's something called the Convenio Especial that is different in every comunidad autónoma, in every region in Spain. There are 17 regions in Spain. This is a social security program in which you can pay your access into public healthcare system. Cost 60 euros if you're younger than 65, 157 euros if you're older than 65. Now, the good thing about the public healthcare system access is that the treatment of pre-existing conditions is covered. Everything is covered, but you will still have to pay medicines retail price, no subsidies in your medicines under the Convenio Especial. Okay, you don't have absolute full access to public healthcare system. Only if you pay Social Security, if you're working in Spain, you pay Social Security, then you have also subsidies for your medicines price. Can I use my current health insurance from the UK and USA? My short answer is, if it's NLV compliant, yes. The problem is that many could potentially not be compliant, okay? And you can find many blocks on the way. For example, the certificate of coverage is not in Spanish. You will have to translate it. Maybe they have co-payments for certain things. Maybe they have reimbursements. Maybe they have some waiting periods. Maybe they are considered to be travel health insurance by the officer in the consulate reviewing your case. It could be a headache, okay? So my long answer, but recommendation is that you get a Spanish private health insurance that you know that it's non-lucrative visa compliant. Of course, you can find them on Spainguru.es, okay? But it has to, they're usually very affordable compared to, US policies. To give an example, so it is probably the way to go, in my opinion. Can I apply with the UK S1 form if I'm a retiree? Yes. Do I need a Spanish bank account to get a private health insurance in Spain? No, you don't need it. But if you have a Spanish bank account, potentially you have the option to pay on a monthly basis and still get your certificate of coverage in Spanish, okay? Potentially. Can I pay on a monthly basis? Again, I answered that. Can there be reimbursements? This is a gray area. In some consulates, it's a no-no. And in other consulates, they don't say anything. There are private health insurances that say that they are compliant for NLV, that have reimbursement clauses there, and some people were accepted, some people were denied. So it's up to you if you want to take the risk. What if, will I get a refund if I am denied? So that will depend on what you're signing, okay? At least with the policies that I recommend on Spainguru.es, you have a full refund clause, no questions asked, no conditions, okay? But it will depend on the policy that you sign. If you sign a policy that says there's a partial refund, or that they will only refund you if the visa is denied because of health insurance and no other reason. So read all your contract, read what you're signing, because it's important that you understand the cancellation clause is very, very important that you understand what you're signing. So always check what you're signing, check with your broker, with your exclusive agent, or the company that you're dealing with, because it's very, very important that you understand it. What are the top companies in Spain? So first, we have Adeslas, Asisa, DKV, ASA, Salus, Caser, Sanitas, AXA, Mafre. And if size matters, Adeslas is by far the largest with 29% of the market, Sanitas 16%, Asisa 13%, DKV 7.5%, then Mafre, AXA, etc., etc. Okay, so there you have some options. Okay, any of these companies are equally good, in my opinion. Okay, some of them, they have maybe better coverage in a specific region. Maybe in that region they have less or more doctors of a specific type of medicine. It's something that you need to investigate, but also this changes over time, because they do different agreements every year. Okay, so maybe this year they have this hospital and they have it for the next 5 years, but after 5 years that hospital no longer work with Sanitas, for example. Okay, they don't take Sanitas, they only take Asisa and DKV, and vice versa. So it is dynamic, right? In general, all these companies are reputable and they work well. That's my opinion. I have had 3 of them, okay, so far, including Adeslas, and they work very well in general. Now, someone mentioned that in Washington, D.C., the BLS website was trying to sell them a travel health insurance. And recently in the NLV Q&A session that I recommend you to join next week, It's just a Q&A session where we just talk candidly about the non-lucrative visa. Someone was mentioning that also in Manila, in Philippines, they are trying to sell this travel health insurance. But I'm sorry for the noisy slide. On the bottom left, you can see that both the consulate in Washington, D.C. and the BLS office, they will say that they will not accept a travel insurance. You will have to get your compliant private health insurance, okay? So it is a bit contradictory and misleading at best that the BLS website tries to sell you this, because you won't be able to apply with this type of health insurance. So be careful with that, okay? As I mentioned, I have partnered with an exclusive agent of Adeslas, Mr. Carlos Blanco. I released a video last week where I show you his office. He has a few things that make him unique. He's also an expert immigration lawyer, so he understands perfectly the non-lucrative visa process or any other Spanish visa process. And he can do start date extensions. This is extremely important because most of the companies will only start your start date of your policy only 1 month in advance. So you have to be very careful when you sign the papers, because you need to start the visa, the policy very quickly, okay? Whereas with Carlos, you don't need that. You don't have to have that stress, because he can extend the start date in the future as long as you need for your non-lucrative visa application. And it's all about timing. It's so important. So there you have a very good resource. And here you can have some very nice reviews about working with him. Of course, he can also help you with your non-lucrative visa application process itself. It's also a relocation company. So many things about Carlos, but specifically about the health insurance, I think he's the best out there. So definitely consider getting a non-binding quote from him and shop around, of course. But he has these very interesting characteristics. Now let's move to something else, health-related, but in fact has nothing to do with the health insurance. This is the medical certificate, okay? You need to provide a medical certificate that states that you don't have infectious disease. The list of infectious disease is a protocol of health regulation of 2005, international protocol, and these diseases are, pneumonic plague, yellow fever, Ebola, this kind of things, okay? So can sound a bit ridiculous, because you can enter Spain as a tourist, even if you had Ebola, nothing would happen. But if you had to stay 90 days plus, you have to show this certificate. But yeah, it is how it is. Important, the medical certificate has a 3-month validity. It has to be valid at the time of submission of documents. We're going to talk about different types of doctors and different types of countries, okay? For example, in the USA and in the UK, it works differently with the medical certificate. So in the USA, you have to go to your doctor and hopefully bring a template, because the wording has to be perfect. There on the screen on the right, you have a template that is both in English and in Spanish. The doctor has to sign both of them, okay? Both, not only the English one. It's important, because if he doesn't sign the Spanish one, it's like not valid, okay? And you will have to sworn translate it. If you only use a template in English, you will have to sworn translate it. That will cost you 40 euros. Average, okay? So you save some money if it also comes in Spanish. In the States, it's enough if you print it with the doctor's letterhead, get a stamp from the doctor's office, make sure that it's doctor's signature, and it has to look official, okay? Cannot be the front desk person signing the document or anything. It has to be the doctor, all right? But in the UK, if you use a UK doctor, the doctor has to be FCDO registered, and you need to apostille it, okay? So not only if the certificate is only in English, you have to sworn translate it, but also you need to obtain an apostille if the doctor signing is a UK doctor. By the way, you can find FCDO registered doctors on Spainguru.es for a fully online service with a discount on Spainguru. And then there is another option, which is the Spanish doctor, okay, which has many pros and a little con. The pros are as follow. First of all, you don't need to sworn translate it because it's already in Spanish. Second of all, you don't need to apostille. It's a registered doctor. You can find this doctor also on Spainguru.es, okay? And it is a fully online service, okay? You just do a Zoom call, WhatsApp call, whatever, and he will ask you some questions and issue the certificate. Now, what is the cons? Some consulates have let's say, a strict requirement that you have to be physically in Spain when the Spanish doctor certificate is issued, okay? Some consulates like this are, if I'm not wrong, Manchester, although the doctor told me that lately Manchester is accepting most of them a bit erratically, but for example, London is accepting the Spanish doctor, Edinburgh is accepting, Miami is accepting, Toronto is accepting. I can't remember the list. If you want to know, contact the doctor on Spainguru.es. select the consulate where you're applying from, and the doctor will tell you, yes, this certificate is being accepted, or no, my certificate is not being accepted. But it is useful to know that you have the option to get an online Spanish doctor certificate because of all these advantages that it has. Frequently asked question. My doctor won't sign the medical certificate template. What can I do? Change doctor. My doctor is not FCDO registered in the UK. Is his certificate valid? No. He has to register at the FCDO, okay, so that you can apostille the certificate. This is the UK. How do I know the Spanish doctor certificate is accepted at my consulate? Contact him. It's free to contact him and ask him. You fill the form on Spainguru.es and the doctor will tell you, okay? And this is a table that summarizes what I just said. Only the UK needs to be apostilled. Yes, everything that we just mentioned. And here are some outliers, some exceptions, but since you are part of the Spainguru community, I will show you and I will share it with you. Somebody at the Chicago consulate needed to apostille their medical certificate. Okay, it was required. This person applied for a non-lucrative visa, everything was okay, but they wanted an apostille for the medical certificate and only gave 10 days to the person to get it. And it's something that never happened in the US, as far as I know, in years that I'm looking at this. But it has happened, and this person just notarized the medical certificate, got an apostille from the notarization, and submitted it, and it worked. And hopefully, 99.999 that it won't happen to you, but you have to know that things like this happen in Spanish bureaucracy. Now, let's talk about clean criminal background check. This document is normally the one that takes the longest to obtain in any country, okay? UK, USA, Canada, Australia, it takes long, okay? Generally, it's the one that takes longest. Maybe if you married somewhere else, for example, if you married in South Africa or in Trinidad and Tobago or in Seychelles or stuff like that, and you're legally married there and you have to obtain the document there, maybe that takes even longer than a criminal background check. Otherwise, the police check is the one that takes longer. It must be squeaky clean in the previous 5 years. And in the UK, it's called the ACRO. You will have to apostille it, sworn translated. It usually has a 6-month validity. Always check with your consulate. Same happens with the FBI background check. Federal apostille, no state apostille, and sworn translation, and usually a 6-month validity. Always check with the consulate and BLS office. Am I still eligible with records on my background check? Yes, but it depends how serious they are. If there's conviction time, blood crime, stuff like that, probably even if they happened decades ago, you will get denied. So better to go through an expungement process, delete those records before applying for the non-lucrative visa. Okay, if you're in this situation, always go with legal help. Always, in my opinion. Am I still eligible with a no live trace, ACRO in the UK? Yes, you are, but consulates will ask for an extra report from ACRO, from the police, stating what is the record that is not showing or is showing as a no live trace. Okay. So this can also happen. Can I expedite the background check federal apostille? No, since 2020, there is no expedition. Okay, it takes 5 to 6 weeks to get an apostille. But if you use Spainguru's recommended private apostille services, it can be as short as 10 business days. Okay, of course, you will have to pay an extra for it. But if you're in a rush, definitely recommend it. Okay, can I notarize the background check and use a state apostille instead? This worked in the past, but now it doesn't work and it's a straight denial. So don't do it. Always federal apostille. Where can I have my fingerprints taken? In the US. So you can use the USPS post office. You can use also channelers, private channelers, okay? And also you can get a form and put your own wet ink fingerprints, but nobody recommends doing that because it can be rejected and it takes time for the snail mail to arrive rejected, etc. So better to do it scanned. What if my fingerprints are illegible? Send me an email to hello@spainguru.es and I will give you some solutions. Tips for the criminal background check or comments from our community. It was taking 5 to 6 weeks in April. It's still taking the same for the ACRO, okay, for the ACRO in the UK. The FBI background check, if you order it electronically, okay, you just fill a form, you get it electronically during the same morning, the same working day, you get the PDF. And what it takes time is to apostille it, that I just mentioned you, okay? And for Canada, the same. Also, it's taking very short time to get your police check, and the apostille apparently is taking only 10 days. Okay, so this is what I hear. There is some confusion also by some apostille requirements from Canada, but maybe it's going too much in depth into our Canadian friend's case. I highly recommend you going on Spainguru's YouTube channel. I have a video about apostille from Canada and also other EU countries that I just released last week, I believe. So watch it if you're in this situation. Proof of not working. Okay, many people choose to retire in Spain. This is why this visa is called a retirement visa. In many cases, you don't have to be retired to apply for the NLV. Many young people don't want to take a sabbatical year or more, or don't need to work because they have the savings and apply for this visa. And there's no age limit to do it. But the most common case is someone who wants to move to Spain to retire. So if you show proof of a receipt of a pension, that's the best you can do. The consulates will not have any doubt that you plan to go back to work. They will understand that you are retired, you're a pensionist. So that's the best you can do, right? Now, if you're still working, many consulates, they will ask you in the UK to show a P45 form saying that you don't work anymore. In the US, a resignation letter or termination letter from employer, both translated and notarized. And if you are freelancers in the UK, notarized affidavit promising not to work, UK, a letter from HMRC, and accountant stating having ceased trading and deregistered from self-employment, okay? Now, $1 million question. Should I quit before I get the visa? I would tell you the answer now. You shouldn't, okay? But you have to be very careful. If you're in this situation, again, go with a professional help, okay? If you really need to keep your job, because many consulates, they will have trouble accepting you if you haven't quit your job at the time of submission, okay? Some consulates are open to it, but there are some, let's say, extreme cases about it, okay? I'm gonna also answer you the nuances by reading some comments of our community members that I think are relevant and explain the situation. Is renting out a property considered a job? No, but size matters. If you have 1-2 properties and you rent them long-term, this is passive income. But if you have 30 properties and you rent them on Airbnb, that's a business, okay? If you're someone in between and you have doubts, maybe appointing a property manager would help, because it will make clear that you're not in the daily operations, you're receiving your passive income, and that's it, because you can still have businesses and be under the non-lucrative visa. The thing is that you shouldn't be working for those businesses. Is investing in stocks considered active income? No. Can I volunteer while on an NLV? Yes, as long as you don't get paid. And we said, I'm going to quote some community members talking about the possibility of working until the very last minute, provided you get your visa granted. And we're talking about UK consulates. Someone says a P45 is one way, but so is a letter from your employer stating that you have resigned and will leave on a certain date. Then someone else says, looks like it's a bit of a potluck if they accept a letter from HR department in place of a P45 if working to last minute, okay? So in the UK, they tend to be stricter, okay, about the P45. And then someone recently asked again this, like, can I stay working until the last minute? I don't want to quit my job unless they give me the visa, etc. And the answers were not conclusive, okay? The answers, there was no one there that could actually say in a 22,000 member group that recently they didn't provide the P45 in the UK. This is the situation. Now in the US, it's a bit different. They're more open to this situation. For example, someone said the Los Angeles consulate will accept a notarized letter of intent that states your plan on quitting upon obtaining the visa before leaving for Spain. It was part of the official requirements in the DC consulate saying that this is a possibility. And yeah, they are more open to this. Every consulate has its own rules or interpretations. You have to be very careful because, for example, recently, and this was in June, okay, so 1 month ago, 1.5 months ago, Ronald applied for a non-lucrative visa, and his documents were not accepted. The reason for the declination was that I presented a letter from my employer stating that my retirement date is August 29, and I was going to request a visa with starting date in September 1st. Okay, so he said, like, I don't want a visa until September 1st when I quit. And the BLS didn't want to accept his documentation, right? So I don't know what happened with this case right now, but it is something that, as I said, is continually evolving. Then there's this other case. This is in Buenos Aires Consulate, my hometown, Buenos Aires. And this is a Venezuelan national applying for a non-lucrative visa, but in December 2023. However, I think this case is very interesting because it represents what can go wrong. This person was denied a non-lucrative visa because showed activity in his LinkedIn profile. This person appealed, went to court to Madrid, and Madrid said that the consulate was right. This person showed activity in the LinkedIn profile, and that's why they denied a non-lucrative visa. This is crazy, right? So you have to be very careful about this situation, about like, oh yeah, I'm working now, I plan to retire. Yeah, if you give me the visa, or, I plan to take a sabbatical year, but then I want to go back to work. And you say that happily, thinking that that is fine, and it's not. It's really not. So be careful with that. Then once you get your non-lucrative visa, another story is, but before that, you have to be very careful. Now, let's talk about marriage birth certificates and non-married couples. Married couples need a valid and updated certificate, like marriage certificate. Okay, so from the authorities where you married. If you married abroad, you have to get that certificate again. And it has 6 months validity unless stated otherwise in the requirements or in the certificate itself. So it has to be valid when you apply. Had to apostille it by the authorities that issue it, and you have to sworn translate it. In the States, it's a state apostille because you married at the state in the United States, not a federal apostille, as far as I understand. Children also. If you plan to apply with children, you will need new original copies with their validities, sworn translates, apostille, and non-married couples can also apply, but they need to make the case. They need to prove that the relationship exists. Okay, the best, strongest case is that you are legal partners. Okay, you went to a notary, or depending on your home country, process to become legal partners and not married, but you are a couple. Okay, a legal couple, right? However, there is another way, which is stable partners, pareja estable. Okay, if you show and you prove that you have been living together for more than 1 year or less, but you have a child together, then you have also a strong case to apply as a couple. The solution, if they deny you, like they don't believe that you're a couple, you apply both as two main applicants, but of course, the financial threshold will be different. As I said, the certificate must be apostilled in the country that issued them and sworn translated to Spanish. Of course, you can find recommended sworn translators in Spainguru.es. Frequently asked question, what about adult children and ascendants? And I'm sorry to say that after May 20th, 2025, you cannot add adult children. That is your children that are over 18 years old, neither the ascendants or parents. Okay, they must apply as main applicants as of this date. So yeah, those are bad news because the non-lucrative visa became more restrictive in this sense. And here's the Article 61 of the Reglamento de Extranjería, that it talks about all the things that I just mentioned. But in case you want to see the law directly. What are sworn translators? We mentioned them very much, but what are they? Sworn translators are accredited by the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. No one else can accredit a sworn translator, okay? They pass a very difficult exam to become certified, and each sworn translator has a unique registration number issued by the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Their translations are accepted by all Spanish institutions, official institutions, including the Spanish consulates abroad. Translations are done remotely and signed with a legally valid e-signature, electronic signature. So you don't need physical mail for this. So the way that you do it, for example, you obtain your FBI background check, you need to sworn translate it. You obtain the PDF, the electronic FBI background check. The PDF, you send it to a sworn translator, and you say how much are you going to charge me and how long it's going to take. And then the sworn translator will tell you the price, will tell you how long it's going to take, will sworn translate it upon acceptance of the job, and send you a PDF with the translation that has a legally valid e-signature. So no physical mail needed, okay? Can I use any translator from the American Translator Association? And I mention this because Miami and Los Angeles have on their websites a mention to this Association of Translators in the USA, but it has nothing to do with the sworn translators. So it is a bit misleading. Well, it has something to do. They are translators too, but they're not appointed by the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Maybe there is a sworn translator that is also part of this association. Why not? I don't know the conditions to be part of this association, but it has nothing to do with the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that's for sure. So be careful with that. Just to be sure about using the right Spanish sworn translators, you can go on Spainguru.es. I have the knowledgeable, affordable, very used to deal with the typical documentation for non-lucrative visa. So you're in very, very good hands. They have stellar reviews, and yeah, I can only say good things about them. So can sworn translators work with several language pairs? No, you can only be a sworn translator for one language pair. English, Spanish, Spanish, English, for example, okay? Or German, Spanish, Spanish, German, right? If you need also sworn translator for different language pairs, because you got married in Germany, for example, you got your child in Italy, you can find them on Spainguru.es. The first recommendation that I have can put you in contact with Spanish sworn translators for any language pair that exists. How much do sworn translation cost? Usually it's around 40 euros for the typical documents of the NLV. What comes first, apostille, then sworn translation? This is a long debate. Many people don't choose to sworn translate the apostille, therefore it doesn't matter what comes first. But experienced lawyers that went through many battles also sworn translate the apostille itself. Therefore, you obtain your original document, you apostille it, and then you take the document and the apostille and you send to sworn translate both. This is the safest, top process you can do, but many people choose to save that sworn translation from the apostille and take a little risk. Actually, about taking risks, I'm going to talk about bank statements, because this is also a big question mark for many people, because they have several pages of bank statements and every page costs them 40 euros to strong translate, roughly average, okay, depending on complexity. It can be more, it can be less, right? But many people say like, oh, do I have to strong translate everything? Well, actually 77% of applicants decide not to strong translate the bank statements, okay? 17% of them translated only summary pages, and 3% of them sworn translated everything. Normally, if you work with a lawyer, with a reputable lawyer, for example, Stern Abogados, recommended by Spainguru.es, they have an in-house sworn translator, so they will sworn translate everything, including the price. Okay, so there is no friction from that side. Okay. And then Adriel says, my bank provided officially stamped and signed relationship letter. Okay. Yeah, that can also happen. For example, Chase in the States, they have bank statements in Spanish. All right. So it's even better. Okay. It's not a strong translation, but it's not translated, right? So if you have that opportunity, maybe the bank can provide it in Spanish. It's even better, and you save some cash. But the best would be to strong translate everything. Okay. You can watch some more videos about frequently asked questions with Ainhoa Manero of Stern Abogados and Sofia Mijail of CABR Relocation Solutions, same office that works with Carlos Blanco, okay, for the health insurance. Sofia is an experienced immigration lawyer as well, who is dealing with non-lucrative visa every single day, and she has wonderful answers for my questions. A little pause here. Remember that it's a Q&A session at the end, so ask your questions anytime in the chat box in the bottom right corner of your screen. Make sure to add a question mark at the end. And if you have to leave earlier, because this webinar is a bit long, it's true, but I like to go in depth, please leave a review on Trustpilot if you think the information I'm sharing today with you is useful and can help others. So yeah, please leave a review on Trustpilot. It will make my day. Thank you so much in advance. Now let's continue with during the application. And we're going to talk about some new developments. Okay, the application process has changed a little bit because of certain time frames that lately started to change. Okay, first of all family members must apply. So you need to have appointments for every family member when you go to the VLS office, which is a big bottleneck because it's hard to get appointments in many consulates or VLS offices. Also, some VLS offices you can only apply in person. Most of them you have to go in person. No one can represent you. You cannot give a power of attorney to a lawyer. So you have to go. Your family has to go. Everyone has to go. Sometimes it's not very nearby. So yeah, also calculate that time that you need to spend. Some consulates will only be by mail. For example, Panama Consulate. Some consulates use a combination or give you the option to do it by mail only. But in the USA, mostly are working with in-person appointments, okay? And in the UK, all of them, okay, because they all work with BLS. And now the NLV will grant you a 90-day window to arrive in Spain, okay? And say now, because lately, and not always, even after the May 20th, they have, the validity date of the non-lucrative visa was only for 90 days. But now they are issuing with a validity window of 365 days. You can see this screenshot. 22 of June 2025 and 21st of June 2026. 365 days with multi-entry. But it is not clear that you can enter Spain anytime during that year. So consider that you need to enter at the very least within the first 90 days of that visa validity period. If you want to know more the nuances about this, watch the video of my interview to Ainhoa Manero, talking about the first year validity period and also the 1 month decision limit time. Okay, because this is a way also that Spain works. They change the law and then they give the problem to the consulates. Okay, and then the consulates, they see all the time frames and they look around, they see all the piles of papers and everything, and they wonder how they're gonna do. Okay, so it takes some time for them to adapt to the new requirements. Okay, or maybe different softwares, time frames, etc. So right now, even if the law says something, always take it with a pinch of salt and try to be conservative at the very least. Okay, so arrive within 90 days of your visa validity period, even if it states that it's valid for 1 year, right? What is the reason for the law to change and to give 1 year validity for the non-lucrative visa? First of all, remember that the visa is the piece of paper that goes in your passport. Then once you enter Spain, you have 30 days to get your residency card, but no one gets it in 30 days because there's no appointments, again, right? So what happened is that the visa expired and people didn't have the residency card, so they were in no man's land. They didn't have a visa in their passport that was valid. They didn't have a residency in Spain. So the authorities decided, okay, we're going to give them a year visa validity, so at least they have a visa with multi-entry, okay, so they can travel in and out of Spain while their residency is being processed, right? So this is the main reason to give 1 year of visa validity, not because they want you to go anytime in the following year with a visa, right? So, but still, watch that video with Ainhoa Manero on Spainguru YouTube channel, because she tells you the nuances, and also she's asking the authorities to give an answer, a proper legal answer on what it means, because not even the lawyers know exactly. So I've seen answers in the groups there, like people saying like, yeah, this is for this is for that, but honestly, like, don't pay attention to that. Only listen to the lawyers, okay? And specifically the lawyers who are specialists in this visa, not just any lawyer, because some lawyers are immigration lawyers, but they're doing asylum cases every day, okay? Asylum cases. They're not dealing with the consulates in the States for the non-lucrative visa. So you need to talk with a really specialist, in my humble opinion. Now, common mistakes to avoid when you apply for this visa: no checking specific consular requirements. Remember, there are many different requirements, and even requirements that don't appear anywhere except on Spainguru's community. Okay, so if you join the group, you will see some of them. First of all, read the requirements in English by your consulate, Spanish, the BLS website in English normally only, and then there are internal requirements, as I said, sometimes that people when they have their appointments, they are surprised, like, oh, they also ask for this form, or they also ask for this other thing, right? And then they go to the groups, to Spainguru's non-lucrative visa group, and they write it down, right? So you have to be paying attention to that. So then I also take all this and I upload it to every single dedicated consulates page on Spainguru, so that you are updated. But sometimes, it just like flies like powder. So you have to be really updated about everything that happens, right? Another common mistake: wrong documents, wrong health insurance, wrong chronology, starting with the difficult things at the beginning, at the end, and starting with the easy things at the end, and then they expire, and then leave at the end the difficult stuff. Expired documents again, wrong health insurance, no co-payments. Be careful having co-payments or travel health insurance. Those are denials. Say that you plan to work or not enough proof, or don't convince enough the officer reviewing your case that you're not going to be working. We mentioned that extensively in this webinar. And then we're going to talk about the timing. Normally, you start at the very least 6 months in advance for the US and Canada, maybe in the UK, a little bit longer, 4 to 5 months in advance, before the application, I would say, right? Not moving to Spain. Before the application, you need enough time. You will see some data here that will show you how things work, and they can take time, okay? But you have to be careful, because documents need to be valid when you submit your documentation. Most consulates will retain your passports during the processing. US applicants can get a second passport, and some BLS offices, they will give you the option to keep your passport. BLS may allow UK applicants to keep theirs as well. For example, in Manchester now, you fill a form, you pay a little bit, and then they give you your passport. But the 90-day and 180-day Schengen rule doesn't stop applying, even if you're processing your visa. This is a question also, recent video that I released as well, because people who are applying from within Spain for a digital nomad visa, the 90-day and 180-day rule is frozen, okay? But you have to be within Spain. In this case, you're applying for a consulate, so it's different. How long does the process take? Documents preparation, 2 to 3 months, even longer sometimes. Attending appointment on the 3rd month, normally. Wait for approval, 2 months, approximately. It could be 1 week. It could be more than 3 months, but officially it shouldn't be more than 3. And now with the recent regulation change, it should be no more than 1 month. Although I have not seen this. No one has seen this, really. So yeah, maybe this happens in the near future. 10 days period is given if clarifications or extra documentations are asked by the consulate, so you have to be careful. You can choose visa start date in a 90-day window from application date. This is changing now. You can apparently you can now, I think it's here. Applications must now be submitted no later than 2 months before your planned arrival in Spain, unless exceptional reasons justify a shorter time frame. And you can submit your application as early as 6 months and up to 2 months prior to your intended entry date. So these are the new time frames, okay? But I'm not sure this is even happening right now, that people apply 6 months before. But yes, this is something that it's really changing as we speak. So coming back here. And officially, once you enter Spain, You have 30 days to obtain your TA card, or tarjeta de identidad extranjero, or residency card, which is the plastic card with your face, and that you obtain at the police station or foreign office by putting your fingerprints and showing the empadronamiento. So that will be valid for 1 year, since normally the entry date in Spain, as long as is within the visa validity period. Okay, so yes, after 1 year, you get your residency for 1 year basically, and then you have to renew it for a period of 2 years, and then after a period of 2 years, total 5 years. This is the typical time frames for initial application and renewals. Another way to see it, okay, this is timeline here. Each segment is 1 month, so you apply in letter A. You can choose your visa start date within 90 days, although this is changing now. And then imagine you get your visa granted, and the consulate makes you happy and gives you the date that it puts the start dates, the date that you chose in the initial form, and then the visa validity starts counting. The visa validity now is giving for 365 days, but still, as I said, I recommend entering Spain within the first 90 days, as we used to do in the last years. And then you enter Spain almost at the end of this period on letter C, right? And then once you enter in letter C, you will have 30 days to get your TA card. And then you will have to renew your visa after 1 year, okay? But you can start with the renewal process as early as 60 days prior to the expiration of your TA card and up to 90 days after. But nobody recommends doing it at the end. Everyone starts early, because in case of denial or problems or whatever, rejection, etc., you still have a valid period to stay in Spain. Now, also another way to see the application process, and again, this is just for information purposes only, it can vary depending on your location, your personal situation, and the time frames, but this is, let's say, an average common process. First, you find your consulate. Second, you check the official requirements at the consulate in English and Spanish, BLS office, non-published requirements on social networks. Collect necessary documents, check their validity, okay? You start with the hardest one. Normally, police checks, ACRO in the UK. If you married in strange countries like Trinidad and Tobago, that's strange, understand me, not common. Maybe those take long time to obtain and to apostille, okay? So be careful with that. Obtain your medical certificate, 3 months validity. You will apostille and translate the documents that require an apostille and translation. In the case of UK, for a UK doctor, also apostille. You will sort out your private health insurance. Okay, be careful with the short time frame to start the health insurance, unless you use Spainguru's recommended agent, who can extend it in the future. Or you will obtain your S1 form if you're a UK pensionist and you don't want to use a private health insurance, which is also recommended to have. It doesn't have to be the full requirement and everything, but at least some sort of private health insurance while you're applying for the public healthcare access is highly recommended, because it takes time to get effective access to the doctors in Spain, even if you started the process before. So have something for that period. Then you will book your appointment with your consulate or BLS office. And of course, maybe you start doing this even earlier, even before you start gathering your documents. Attend your consulate or BLS appointment, if applicable, and then you will wait officially 12 weeks. Now officially will be 1 month with a negative administrative silence. That means if after 1 month, supposedly, you didn't receive an answer, you can legally now start appealing, okay, in court for an answer. So this looks to be more faster process. And then you will get your visa, hopefully, and travel to Spain. When you travel to Spain, normally the best thing you can do, there are several things that you can do when you enter Spain. We're going to talk about that, but the most important probably is obtaining the empadronamiento. Once you arrive to a city, you rent a place, and with the rental contract, you go to the city hall and you get a certificate that shows that you're living in that property. Okay, that's the empadronamiento. And that paper, it will be required when you try to obtain your TA card, your residency card. Another way to see it is that you start, for example, this is another way, a chart of 11 months, and you get your police check, your marriage certificate, birth certificates. If you're applying with family, you can see there is a validity period. Documents need to be valid when you apply. Then you will apostille and translate. Then you will get your financial documents, medical certificates, health insurances. Start to get appointments 2 months before, at the very least, from when you intend to get an appointment. Then you allow a processing period of at least 3 months. And then your visa validity will start, and you enter Spain, and your health insurance coverage starts. This is another way to see it. We mentioned this before about the new timeframes for applying for the non-lucrative visa. It's still to be seen if they apply in practice. And here's the Article 63 that describes the procedure for the non-lucrative visa that talks about these timeframes, in case you want to see the law directly. Let's go back to taxes, okay, a little bit more. Many people plan to sell their houses before moving to Spain, but you have to be careful because Spanish tax authorities may want you to pay capital gains tax on the gains you made by selling your property in your home countries, right? The best way to avoid this is to time the moving to Spain and your house sale correctly, okay? Tax years, as we said, start on January 1st and end on December 31st. They're different than immigration years. Immigration years are natural years. So if you arrive to Spain in June, the immigration year goes from June one year to the June next year. It's different than the tax year, so they may overlap only 6 months, for example, right? So it's a bit different. So the easiest way to understand how to not become a Spanish tax resident during the same year in which you sell your property is you sell your property in 2025, in December 2025, and you move to Spain in January 2026, okay? Therefore, in 2025, you were not a Spanish tax resident, therefore, you're not liable for CGT. But if you have to sell your property during the same year in which you plan to move to Spain, then you have to be careful to spend in Spain less than 183 days. Therefore, if you haven't been in Spain at the beginning of the year and you first move to Spain after July 2nd, you are good to go because you're gonna only spend 182 days in Spain, regardless if your house was sold during the same year. That year, you're not a Spanish tax resident because you only spend in Spain physically 182 days. If you want to read more about Spanish taxes, watch videos about taxes, especially focusing US and UK nationals, of course, go on Spainguru.es. I have tons of information about it. Now, let's talk about after approval. And here we have how you arrive to Spain, right? And how you live under a non-lucrative visa in Spain. First of all, arrival. Remember Schengen, 29 countries, internally borderless. If you fly directly from outside of Schengen into Spain, you will get Spanish tax authorities. But if you go to Spain via another Schengen country, for example, you fly from New York to Frankfurt, you get a German authority stamp, and then you fly from Frankfurt to Madrid, for example, there are no Spanish stamps, so you are under a problem. For that, the best is to obtain a declaración de entrada. This is a one-pager document that you can get in a police station. Be careful because not all police stations know about this, but police stations in international airports or close to the border are used to this, okay? But I have recently published this article here about how you fill it up. The best is that you print it out, you fill it, and you go to the police station with already filled document, and they just stamp it and you go, okay? This is the best you can do, and a police station that is used to do it. And then that declaración de entrada, you will, when you obtain your TA card, they will ask you, where are your stamps? When did you come into Spain? You don't have any stamps. Oh, here is the declaración de entrada. Here's when I came in. Okay, that is a legal thing issued by the police itself, all right? And always remember to enter within the visa validity window. Now require 90 days of the initial period of 365 days, okay, until we hear something else from the authorities. Get a Spanish card when you arrive. You will get SMS from Spanish authorities. Open a non-resident bank account by a brick-and-mortar bank in Spain. You will need it to pay your bills, your rent, and everything, and it will take time to get your TA card. Obtain an empadronamiento, as we said, from the city hall, and obtain officially in 30 days your TA card, but this will be difficult. Is the padrón strictly necessary to obtain the TA? And there are no appointments to obtain the TA. What should I do? This is what a lawyer says. The TA appointment in practice is not required within 1 month. Everyone knows it. Nobody can do it. In most cities, there are no appointments. So it can take even up to 6 months, okay, to obtain it. This is a bad case, okay, but it takes time. The sooner the better, but there's no immediate rush. So don't get paranoid about it. Now, the empadronamiento, in 90% of the police stations, they will require you one, okay? But not all of them will require you. Some of them will accept an Airbnb receipt as a proof of address or a booking.com receipt. Or some cities, for example, in Malaga, where I am, they're accepting the rental contract itself, okay? Because they know that it's taking a long time to obtain an empadronamiento. It takes 3 months. And also the empadronamiento has a validity period of 3 months. So you have to time that very well. So you have to be careful. Renewal process, how and when? The first year you get a residency, and then the moment in which you enter Spain within visa period, after 1 year, starts the period to renew. That starts 60 days prior to expiration and ends 180 days after expiration, 90 days after expiration of your TA card. You renew for the year 2 and 3 together, right? And the financial requirements we mentioned is double the amount if you have savings, but if you have passive income, you need to calculate how much money you're going to be having income during those 2 years, right? and do a combination of savings and passive income. Second renewal for year 4 and 5 will be the same as year 2 and 3, unless you move to another region, because there are certain region variations in the requirements or in the ways the things are done. And then you can apply for the long-term residence, also known as permanent residence, although permanent residence doesn't exist. It's the long-term residence, but you need to comply with certain minimum stay requirements. We're going to talk about that later on. Now, this is a super controversial thing. The renewal periods are 2 years now. There were rumors they were going to be 4, but no, they stay at 2 years. But then they included in the new regulation the 183-day minimum stay requirement to renew your non-lucrative visa or any other temporary visa. Now, visa holders, and many people say that this would align with Spanish tax residency rules, but as I said, the tax year and the immigration year may or not overlap because they're different. One is a calendar year and the other one is a natural year. So there are ways to do things so that you don't become a Spanish tax resident under non-lucrative residence, okay? But of course, legal advice is advised, okay? Now, this is very important. There is legal ambiguity about this minimum stay requirement of 183 days of minimum stay in Spain to renew your visa, because there is a Supreme Court ruling that already deleted the previous minimum stay requirement from the previous regulation, okay? They deleted it because they say that it has to be in the main law, the law for 2000, and not in the regulation. Remember the hierarchy of the law and the regulation? The Supreme Court says you cannot put a limit of minimum stay in the regulation. It has to be in the main law. But of course, the main law takes a long time, and it takes a lot of political agreement to change, whereas the reglamento or regulation of the law, it's easy to change, okay, by the government, even without political agreement, okay? But they are doing something, let's say it, illegal by putting a minimum stay requirement, because this goes against the freedom of movement of one of the pillars of the European Union Foundation, etc., etc. This is what the Supreme Court says. So the lawyers who understand this, in this case, I know a manera from Stand Abogados, tell you like you don't have to stay minimum 183 days to renew your non-lucrative visa. Therefore, making it easier not to become a Spanish tax resident. Okay, so know this. Read the articles. Watch my videos, my interviews to I know Manera about the minimum stay requirement of the non-lucrative visa, because it will open your eyes and give you many more options from an immigration and tax perspective as well. So that's the situation. Case study: financial requirements. Let's talk about an example, because many people have trouble understanding how you calculate this. We said a couple needs at least 36,000 euros for an initial application. So for the renewal for 2 years will be double that, 72,000 euros. Now imagine that the main applicant has a pension of 15,000 euros per year. So in 2 years, this person will make 30,000 euros. That counts as double, right? So they will just need to provide an extra 42,000 euros to get to 72,000 euros. Those can be savings, could be rental income. As I said, be careful with that, with the rental income. It can be dividends. It can be another pension, okay, etc. So yes, basically passive income, recurrent passive income counts double too, okay? They will require you double the funding, but the recurring income comes double. So as I said, be careful with rental income because it's not widely accepted by every region. There's been some cases, but many people in the groups will tell you, yeah, I applied purely on rental income for the NLV and I was accepted and I'm renewing and everything is fine, okay? And some other people will find friction. So yeah, if you can, don't use rental income as passive income if you can, okay? It's always good also to use it as a, let's say, completing the requirement, not as a main source. Documentation requirements for the renewals: ongoing private medical insurance coverage, public healthcare system coverage, whatever you have. Don't count on going to the public healthcare system on the first renewal. Get your private health insurance for year 2 and 3, let's say for the renewal, because it takes weeks or months to get your public healthcare via the Convenio Especial, and you will run the risk of not being covered when you have to renew. You need to show updated passport copies for both individuals. As I said, ongoing health coverage, and no police records. Many people also drive under the influence once in Spain, and that would be a police record, and that could be a denial for your renewal. All right, and avoid health coverage gaps. This is also a main denial reason. Okay, and for the registration, 90% of cases they will ask you for the empadronamiento, for example, most cases. Time you need to spend in Spain to maintain your residence, obtain a long-term residence, and citizenship. So these are the minimum stays. As we said, for the renewal, it's a gray area, the 183-day requirement, minimum stay, even more than gray area. It's, let's say, an illegal requirement that should not be in the regulation. It should be in the main law. Therefore, it is very easily and legally defensible, 100% winning chance if they deny your visa because you stayed less than 183 days. This was Ainhoa Manero says. I'm not an immigration lawyer. Please consult with a legal expert, but I have videos of her telling you this that I highly recommend you to watch. For the long-term residents, we said after 5 years, minimum stay requirement, this is very important, and you have to comply with this if you want the long-term residence. You cannot be outside of Spain more than 10 months in 5 years to obtain it. They don't have to be consecutive, but they cannot be in more than 6 months in one block, as far as I understand, right? So no more than 10 months in 5 years to obtain the long-term residency. Long-term residency application is quite simple. There's no financial requirements, but you also have to have no gaps in health coverage, right? But basically, here we are with the minimum stays, and it's no more than 10 months outside of Spain, not the European Union, Spain, in the previous 5 years. People say, like, what if I go to another Schengen country, etc.? Well, the rule says Spain, okay? Another story is that they maybe, because it's internally borderless, it's not easy to enforce or understand that you were outside, but there are controls sometimes, and this could happen. It happens more often than we think, that in the end, Spanish authorities know that you haven't been in Spain, so be careful with that. And some people also choose to renew for a third time the non-lucrative visa, but not in every region they're permitted. For example, in Galicia, it's not allowed. I don't know in which region they permit or not. I understand that in Madrid, you can do it a third time of 2 years, which can help you comply with a minimum 10 months, maximum 10 months in 5 years outside of Spain. And if you're planning to apply for the Spanish citizenship, especially for people who benefit from the 2-year fast track, Hispano-Americans, Filipinos, Andorra, Portugal, Guinea Equatorial, these people can apply as soon as 2 years only of legal residency in Spain. But be sure not to be outside of Spain more than 3 months per each year, and not 6 months in 24 months. No more than 90 days per 12 months, okay? Be careful with that. And long-term residence, if you're a holder of long-term residence and you're applying for the Spanish citizenship, you cannot be outside of the EU more than 1 year consecutively, or no more than 30 months in 5 years, okay? Now, some common pathways to go to obtain a work permit after 1 year is recommended. And it is recommended that you renew your non-lucrative visa and then you apply for a modification to a work permit. In case they deny you, you still have the renewal of your non-lucrative visa. And it is much easier to apply for a modification of a non-lucrative residence to a work permit than applying for a work permit directly from outside of Spain. It is much easier. I'm not saying it is easy. I'm saying it is easier, okay? And many people think, oh, Bruno, be careful when you say this, because it sounds like it is automatic that after 1 year of non-lucrative residence, you have the right to obtain a work permit. No, it's not automatic. You will have to go through a procedure. You have to comply with the requirements, and potentially you will be denied, okay? But many people do it. My wife did it, okay? For example, the modification of her permit for a self-employment, okay? Not from non-lucrative visa, but to a self-employment. Now, you have different pathways. The most common are you present your own project, cuenta propia, okay? Your project is accepted, a business plan, and they give you a work permit, or you get a job offer, a company is ready to sponsor you, and you are accepted, and you change to a work permit, or potentially you can transition to a digital nomad visa, which is controversial because you need to show you were working for the previous 3 months on a remote basis, which is supposedly not accepted by the non-lucrative visa. But as I told you, it's a gray area. So there are people who are changing from non-lucrative visa to digital nomad visa to normalize their situation, and there's been successful cases. As I mentioned before, some passport holders can benefit from a 2-year fast track to apply for Spanish citizenship. Countries in red benefit from this, but otherwise, countries in gray, normally, as you know, to apply for citizenship by residency, they have to normally wait 10 years instead of 2. And closing here, and before going to the Q&A session, remember that you can use Spainguru.es for absolutely free. You have weekly newsletter every Monday, YouTube channel, 1 video per day, blog posts with almost 2,000 articles, the vibrant community with a Spanish Non-Lucrative Visa group of 22,000 members, super active group. Highly recommend you joining it. And you can use tools like, you know, watching my webinars, joining the free newsletter, but also the step-by-step move to Spain checklist. Regardless on which status you move, if you want to move to for work, for studying, for whatever, use the checklist, because it can give you quite a lot of information and time frames, so you can easily understand how this project can be done. And you can also find vetted services. Of course, these are paid services, but I have been personally vetted by me. I have been recommending them for several years. Most of them and many of them I have used them personally. So I only have, let's say, 5-star recommended services on Spainguru. You're in very good hands. I have very good reviews out there. Nobody's saying that I sent anyone to the wrong person. So you can find immigration experts there, tax advisors, financial planners. At least those, I highly recommend engaging with them, at least 1 hour consultation just before moving to Spain, so that you understand what your possibilities are. And if you plan to stay in Spain for the long term, so that you establish at least a pathway and a strategy to stay in Spain long term. Because many people say like, oh, I need the NLV or I need the student visa, etc., but they don't think long term. So it's important that you engage with professionals so that you understand what the possibilities are for you specifically. And if you plan to apply for the visa directly because you're already into it, you can find compliant health insurance, medical certificates, on translation and postal services, bank accounts, money transfer services, property rentals. If you plan to buy properties in Spain, mortgages, and so much more, 100 services personally vetted by Spainguru. And this is a bonus slide before going into the Q&A. NLV legal assistance. How many people choose legal assistant? In Spainguru's group, 128 votes, 51% chose yes, going with professional help, and 49% no. And I asked for the people who went with professional help. It doesn't have to be Spainguru's recommended partners, just like anyone, okay? Do you think it was money well spent? And 77% said yes, and 23% said no. So it is, I would say, a very high percentage of people who said like, yeah, actually spending money into legal help for the non-lucrative visa is important, or is a good investment. Let's stay in touch. hello@spainguru.es is my email. I always answer my emails. Send me your questions, send me your comments, and join the Facebook group, watch the YouTube, and join the newsletter. Remember, the content of this webinar is for information purposes only and is not legal advice. Requirements listed here are not official. Please check your specific consulate requirements. And let's go to a Q&A session. But before, if you have to leave now and you haven't left a review on Trustpilot, please leave it now. On the top green bar, there's a red button there. It will redirect you to Trustpilot, where you can leave a nice review, and it will really, really help me and others find this content. Thank you so much. Now let's go to the questions. I only have a couple of questions today. I can see that the summer is starting. Not so much activity in general. Thank you so much for joining today, Andrea, and for asking something. When I go to the Manchester BLS and Consulate, the checklist states London. Is this the correct one? You want me to share my screen and see what I find? You need to go to Manchester, right? So you are in, let's do some screen sharing here. I'm going to do it just in front of you. So here we are in Spainguru. And here we have, for example, guides and blogs, visa guides, non-lucrative visa, NLV consulates, UK consulate. So we have Edinburgh. Whoa. What happened there? Still loading. Many consulates. Okay, here. Edinburgh, London, Manchester. So I go to Manchester. Of course, this is Spainguru, but in each of the dedicated pages, we have the links of the official requirements. And also I have all the pieces of content that mention first-hand experiences and Q&A session, Q&A questions related to these consulates, okay? So let's see the visa instructions in English for Manchester. As you can see here on the top, it says Manchester here, okay? We'll accept this. And this is the NLV requirements in English, right? And then it will tell you that you have to apply from BLS International branch in Manchester. So if I push this here, it sends me to BLS International, and it says Manchester, right? And here we will get visa type, and then we go to non-working residency, and here's what we see. The documents required are here, the checklist. It's true, they have one single checklist. This is what you were referring to, probably. That if I push here, the documents required checklist sends me to a PDF that says London. It's true. Yeah, I would assume that that's the general checklist. They have one single checklist for Manchester and London. I don't know if I go to BLS Edinburgh, what happens, but yeah. And let's see here the instructions in English for Manchester. One thing that I wanted to check is that the new financial requirements are not here. The new financial requirements that we mentioned about the certificates of the banks showing the balances per month and the balance on December 31st, they don't appear on Manchester website. but they do appear in the London one, the new ones. Okay, let's go to London. You can see here I have a lot of content about London as well. And let's read the official consulate in London requirements for the NLV. And you can see that in London, they did add the new requirements, the new documentation with the account balances that in Manchester didn't, but they're asking it in Manchester. So something important to have in mind. Okay. And if you're part of the Spainguru Non-Lucrative Visa group, you can see a lot of people applying right now in Manchester. People asking about the time frame for Manchester application, for the new requirements in Manchester, etc. So please join this group, and you can ask your questions anonymously in case you don't want to reveal your identity. Okay, nobody needs to know. This is this would be my answer. Let's go to presentation and this one. We have a Libro de Familia. Okay, so you were here in Spain before. Libro de Familia is what they give you in Spain when you get married, and you have when you get married, I think, and once you start having children, you will note those children inside this Libro de Familia. Yes, it's like a little booklet. I normally have it next to me, but my wife just went to USA and took it. She's from America, so she needs it to get out with one of my daughters. So yeah, we have a Libro de Familia certificate from 2009 as we were married in the Canaries. Do we need to apply for an updated one? The thing that you need to apply for an updated one is this marriage certificate, right? Libro de Familia is not exactly the marriage certificate, certificado de matrimonio. Yes. Libro de Familia is one thing, but strange because not too many people get present this. Let me see. Let me check that out. Let's go to sharing screen again. And certificado matrimonio España. You see, this is the certificate of marriage. El acta de matrimonio. So, this is solicitud de certificado de matrimonio. You need to obtain a new one, in my opinion, okay? As I said, I'm not an immigration lawyer, and I'm not so used to this kind of certificate because normally it's like from the US, UK, and I'm quite sure about what you need to do, but actually from the Spanish ones, and I'm married here in Spain, but not many people are applying with this. So, solicitud de certificado de matrimonio, let's go to this, and maybe I can, certificado de matrimonio, puedes solicitar a través de la electrónica. Yes, you need to get a new one, a new certificado de matrimonio. This, solicitud de certificado de matrimonio con identificación, or with normal mail. Okay, with correo postal, with snail mail, physical mail. If you have a digital certificate you can sign from your computer or mobile phone, you can do it with this, okay? But yes, if you're gonna do it with snail mail, you can do it. Yes. As far as I understand, and this is what you need to do. This is the procedure, okay? Of course, they don't make it easy. It's very wordy. But yeah, I'm gonna share in the chat a link to this. Oh yeah, so I see you were commenting. We have a Libro Familia certificate for 2009 and the certificate, okay, as we're married. I have two certificates as well as the book. So in order to apply, you need to get an updated certificate of marriage certificate. And normally the validity period, unless stated otherwise, in the consulate or in the certificate itself, is 6 months normally, but it could also be 3 months. So be careful with that. Read it and see, obtain a new one and see for how long it's valid. Okay. Excuse me. So I don't see any more questions. It's already 2 hours. So thank you so much for joining today. I really appreciate it to make your time to join today. And if you found the information that I provided in this webinar, please leave a Trustpilot review. It really helps me, makes me also happy, motivates me a lot to see that you are happy as well with what I do. So thank you so much. And this being recorded, I will process the video and upload it to YouTube, and I will send you the link to your emails. Check your spam inbox, if spam folder, if you didn't see the link. But I will send it to you right after I can. Okay. So thank you so much for joining today. Take care, and I'll see you around. And send me an email if you need anything. Bye bye. Oh, and one more thing. Apparently YouTube says you're gonna love watching this video right here. I think you should watch it.